My name's Tom. After my divorce, I moved to Phoenix, telling myself the next time would be different. No shouting. No slammed doors. No Cold War of silence that turned a home into a museum of grudges. The desert was supposed to bleach the past clean. New city, new job, new start. Then I met Ashley. She worked in the claims department at the insurance office where I fixed the servers. She was quiet, careful with her words, the kind of woman who always carried herself like someone afraid to drop something fragile. I didn't realize until later that the fragile thing was herself. We started with small talk, lunches that turned into dinners. She smiled, but her smile never reached all the way. Still, I thought maybe sadness was something two people could share. Maybe if you hold it together long enough, it starts to weigh less. Ashley had a son, Evan, 16. I first met him on a Saturday afternoon when I came by to fix the kitchen sink. He was on the couch, headphones in, the TV muted but flashing light across his face. He looked at me once, then back to his phone, as if I were just another repairman. "Hey, Evan," Ashley said, trying too hard. "Say hello." He didn't. He nodded, barely, then turned up the volume. That was the first silence between us. It wouldn't be the last. We married quietly 6 months later. No big ceremony, no guests, no need for spectacle. Just the three of us in a courthouse that smelled like dust and paper. I remember looking at Ashley's hands. How steady they were when she signed her name. How she didn't look at me when she said, "I do." I told myself it was peace. But peace can sound a lot like distance when you're the only one listening. The house came next. A small place on the edge of town, 3 rooms, a porch that faced the empty stretch of desert. I bought it because it needed work. Broken blinds, cracked tile, a leaky roof. I wanted something to fix. Something that would need me. Every night after work, I tore it apart and rebuilt it. I patched drywall, replaced wiring, sanded the floors until my hands were raw. By the end of the first month, I could walk through the place blindfolded, every creak and fault mapped in my mind. I thought, this will be the proof of my worth. A man can build belonging if he works hard enough. Ashley would stand in the doorway while I worked. "You don't have to do everything yourself," she'd say. But I did. I always did. Evan mostly stayed upstairs. His room became a fortress. Door closed, music loud, the faint smell of burnt dust from his computer fans leaking into the hallway. When he did come out, he moved like a tenant, not a son. He'd grab food, mumble something to Ashley, and disappear again. First, I tried to meet him halfway. I bought him a new set of headphones when his old ones broke. I helped him with his car, changed the oil, checked the brakes. He said thanks once, barely audible, eyes fixed on the ground. That one word carried me for weeks. I thought if I kept showing up, eventually he'd see me as something more than a stranger paying the bills. But respect doesn't grow in silence. It withers there. At dinner, he'd sit across from me with his earbuds half in, nodding to music only he could hear. Ashley used to nudge him, "Evan, take those out." But after a while, she stopped asking. She started talking to him through me, not to me. "Tell Tom what you did at school today. Ask Tom if he wants coffee." I became a conduit, invisible, necessary only for the function I provided. Still, I paid. Groceries, school fees, insurance, gas, the electric bill. I thought that kind of devotion would earn its own gravity. That one day he'd look up and see me not as the man who moved into his mother's house, but as someone who had been building a life around him. Instead, he drifted further. There were small humiliations at first. I'd come home to find my tools borrowed and left in the yard, rusting in the night air. My coffee mug used, unwashed, sitting by the sink. A dent in the truck door that no one mentioned. I'd ask calmly and Evan would shrug. "Wasn't me." Ashley would sigh. "Let it go, Tom. He's just a kid." But he wasn't. He was 16, nearly grown, old enough to understand the difference between carelessness and contempt. Once he came home late, past midnight. I was on the porch, half asleep in the chair, waiting. When he saw me, he rolled his eyes. "Where were you?" I asked. "Out." "With who? Does it matter?" Ashley was behind me in the doorway, robe pulled tight. It's fine, Tom. He's home. Go to bed. Her tone wasn't tired. It was warning. I went inside, the sound of their voices following me down the hall, her soft, his sharp. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew the rhythm. Defense and dismissal. The first cracks in a house that was supposed to hold us. The next morning, his car was gone. He'd taken it without asking, left my tools still sitting in the yard. I found a wrench half buried in the dirt, rust already creeping along the handle. I held it for a long time, staring at the red dust on my palms. It looked like blood. By winter, things had settled into routine. I worked, paid, repaired. They existed around me, parallel lives orbiting the same roof. The air grew thicker with silence. Then one evening I came home early. The lights were on, the TV humming. I paused in the hallway. Evan's voice, low, bitter, drifted from the living room. He suffocates this house, he said. When he's here, it's like there's no air. Ashley didn't argue. She just turned up the volume. The sound of laughter from the sitcom filled the space where my name should have been. I stood there for a long time, watching the flicker of the TV light dance across their faces. They didn't notice me. I realized I had become the ghost in my own home. Unseen, unacknowledged, haunting a life I paid for. I went out to the porch and sat there until the stars burned out. The desert wind crawled through the cracks I hadn't sealed yet, whispering through the empty rooms. It wasn't anger I felt, not yet. Just something colder. A kind of knowing. I wasn't the problem. My presence only made their comfort too visible. They didn't hate me. They hated the reminder of how much they depended on me. That night, Ashley came to bed late. She smelled like wine. She lay beside me but didn't reach out. I turned to face the wall and listened to the hum of the ceiling fan cutting the silence into pieces. That was the moment I stopped believing that effort could build belonging. The next morning, I got up before sunrise, made coffee, and stared out the window at the desert. The house looked peaceful in that hour before anyone woke. Neat, still, unaware. You could almost believe it was happy. Almost. But peace and emptiness look the same when you're standing too close. The morning after I heard those words, the house felt too still, as if it were holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do. Ashley and Evan were still asleep. The sun was climbing through the blinds. I'd installed myself, cutting the kitchen into stripes of gold and shadow. I poured coffee, watched the steam rise, and thought about oxygen. How invisible it is, how you only notice it when it's gone. I didn't yell. I didn't pack a bag. I'd done that once before, in another life, walking out amid broken plates and half-spoken threats. This time I wanted silence to do the work. I started small. I opened the windows and let the desert wind roll through, stripping away the air-conditioned comfort that had kept them so soft. Then I walked room to room and began to unbuild what I'd built. Every kindness reversed. Every convenience dismantled. The doors came first. I unscrewed the hinges one by one, stacking the panels by the garage wall. Each hinge squealed like a confession. The house grew open and exposed, rooms staring into one another like strangers forced to share a secret. I told myself I was only giving them what they wanted, space. Next came the furniture. I listed the couch online, then the coffee table, then the television they stared at instead of speaking. Buyers arrived throughout the afternoon, polite, curious, unaware they were scavenging the remains of a family. I watched each piece leave, the rooms widening into emptiness. By evening, the living room echoed when I breathed. Ashley came home from work first. She stopped in the doorway, purse still on her shoulder. "Where's the sofa?" "Sold it," I said. "Didn't need it." She blinked, searching my face for humor, finding none. "Tom, why would you? It was just taking up space." Her mouth closed around words she didn't say. She walked down the hall calling for Evan. I heard their voices behind his door. Confusion, irritation, then dismissal. They thought it was a phase, some new project of mine. They didn't see that the project was them. That night I turned off the heat. The desert cools fast after sunset. Warmth drains like trust. I sat on the porch, listening to the air thin around the house. Through the window, I could see Ashley rubbing her arms, Evan pulling a blanket tighter. I didn't go in. I watched the glass fog with their breath and thought about how much of mine I'd spent trying to keep them alive. The next day, I emptied the drawers. Not to leave, just to subtract. I took my tools, my photographs, the few books I loved. The rest I left in piles. Things they'd never noticed but always used. When Evan came downstairs, he glanced at the empty spaces, frowned, and left without asking. His silence was still his favorite *p*n. By evening the house looked like a skeleton. Bare bulbs hanging, mattress on the floor, echo where the laughter used to be. I walked through it slowly, touching the walls I'd painted, the nail holes that marked pictures of a family that never really was. Every mark was proof of effort and failure. Ashley tried again that night. "Tom, what's happening to you?" "Nothing," I said. "Something's finally stopping." She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I suppose I had. She'd grown fluent in avoidance. After she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a note. Not long, not bitter. Just a statement of fact. Now there's plenty of air. Breathe freely. I set the keys beside it. The metal clinked against the wood like the closing of a cell door. When dawn came, I walked out without looking back. The air outside was cool. The sky washed clean of stars. My truck idled at the curb, a small engine in an enormous silence. I closed the door behind me, turned the lock, and felt the weight of the key leave my hand forever. As I drove, I imagined the moment they'd wake. Evan first, stumbling into the hallway, surprised by the missing doors, the empty living room, the chill that bit through his blanket. Ashley next, calling my name, finding the note, realizing it wasn't a threat but a truth. For the first time, the air in that house would be theirs alone. 2 days later, my neighbor called, said the lights were off, windows open, blankets drying on the porch rail. "Everything okay over there?" he asked. I told him yes. It was the truest thing I'd said in months. That evening the messages started coming. "Ashley first. Come back. The house is freezing." Then "Evan, you took the doors off? What's wrong with you?" I didn't reply. I read the words, watched the little typing bubbles appear, then disappear. Silence is the only language some people understand. By the third night, she called. I let it ring. The voicemail trembled between anger and pleading. "You've made your point, Tom. Just stop. We can fix this." But there was nothing to fix. They didn't miss me. They missed the heat, the routine, the quiet servitude that kept their lives seamless. They'd mistaken my devotion for air, and now they were choking on the absence of it. I rented a room downtown for the week, a place that smelled of dust and detergent. One window, one lamp, one chair. When I turned on the heat, it rattled like old bones. I lay on the bed and listened to the city hum through the thin walls. It wasn't comfort, but it was mine. Every night before sleeping, I pictured the house. The empty sockets where the doors had been. The furniture gone, the thermostat dark. I wondered if Evan still blamed me for the cold or if, in the quiet, he'd finally heard himself breathe. Sometimes I almost called. Almost. But I'd spent years chasing the echo of belonging. I wasn't about to start again. People think leaving is the hardest part. It isn't. The hardest part is realizing how little collapses when you do. No one chased me down the driveway. No one begged at the door. They just let the air rush in behind me. Maybe that's what they wanted all along. Still, I kept expecting the guilt to come. The flood of remorse, the voice whispering that I'd gone too far. It never did. What came instead was stillness. A strange, weightless calm, like breathing after years underwater. One night, I walked past a cafe window and saw a family eating inside. Father, mother, 2 kids. The father was laughing, head thrown back, eyes crinkled. The scene should have hurt. Didn't. Felt like watching a movie whose ending I already knew. Back at the apartment, I wrote in a notebook, the same one I used to track expenses. "You can't buy air for people who refuse to breathe with you." I underlined it twice. It looked like a confession. They'd asked for space. I gave them emptiness. They'd asked for air. I left them with echoes. When I turned off the light, the darkness didn't press against me the way it used to. It simply settled, gentle and even, like a house finally exhaling. The first night in the apartment, the air smelled like plaster and old rain. The walls were thin enough to hear someone's television bleeding through. Laughter canned and distant, the sound of a life that wasn't mine. I lay on the floor beside an unrolled blanket and told myself this was freedom. No footsteps overhead, no doors slamming, no eyes waiting for me to fail quietly. Morning came pale and gray through the crooked blinds. I made coffee in a dented percolator I'd found at a thrift store. The water hissed, the smell rose, bitter and sharp. I drank it black, standing by the window, watching buses crawl through the city haze. For the first time in years, no one needed me to fix anything. The peace felt unnatural, like holding your breath too long. I spent those first weeks in small rituals. Mornings were for work, simple contracts repairing office networks, the same kind of tasks I used to do before the house became my project. Evenings, I wrote down what time I woke, what I ate, what broke and what I managed to mend. It wasn't journaling, it was inventory. I was counting myself into existence again. Sometimes, on my drive home, I'd pass the old neighborhood. Habit, maybe. The desert light hit the houses the same way, all of them glowing like baked clay. My truck would slow without permission, and I'd find myself staring at the outline of the place I'd left behind. The curtains were different now, bright, new, probably chosen by Ashley to make the rooms feel alive again. I told myself I didn't care who slept behind them. Still, I never stopped long enough to prove it. Work filled the days. Solitude filled the nights. I fixed what was broken around me. A lamp with a cracked wire, a chair with a missing leg, the rattle in the kitchen fan. Each repair felt like an apology whispered into the dark. For what, I wasn't sure, maybe for believing that effort alone could earn belonging. The neighbors didn't talk much. An older couple on one side, a young woman with a dog on the other. Sometimes I'd hear the dog barking at dusk, sharp and lonely, and I'd think of Evan's voice echoing down the hallway the night before I left. He suffocates this house. Funny thing, without me, that house had all the air in the world, yet they still couldn't breathe right. Weeks turned into months. I bought a second-hand couch, a small television, nothing else. When I got paid, I paid rent. When something broke, I fixed it. Simplicity has its own weight. It keeps you from floating off the edge of yourself. Then, one evening in March, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name scrawled in handwriting I recognized immediately, Evans. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. Inside, a single page. His writing was messy, hurried. I'm sorry. We didn't mean what we said. The house feels empty now. Different. No signature. No plea. Just that. I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the paper. The words looked fragile, like they might crumble if I breathed too hard. Somewhere in the city, a siren wailed, faded, died. I folded the letter once and slipped it into a drawer beside unpaid bills. I didn't answer, not out of anger, out of peace. Some apologies are meant to echo unanswered. That night I dreamed of the house. The doors were back on, but they wouldn't close. The wind moved through every room, carrying voices I couldn't quite catch. When I woke, my hands were clenched, the sheets damp with sweat. I made coffee again, stronger this time, as if bitterness could burn away the residue of memory. By spring, the desert turned gold. I drove past the old place once more. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard. Fresh paint on the porch rail, new numbers on the mailbox. Through the windshield I saw movement inside. Strangers laughing, boxes piled in the hallway. A family starting over where mine had ended. For a moment, I felt something close to nostalgia. Then I remembered how small the rooms had felt when no one wanted me inside them. I didn't stop. I just kept driving until the sign disappeared in the rearview mirror. The farther I went, the lighter I felt, though I couldn't tell if it was relief or loss. Nights grew quieter after that. I took to walking the streets when the heat broke, passing bars, laundromats, shuttered shops. The city at night hums like a tired heart. Sometimes I'd see fathers with their kids, Small hands clutching big ones, laughter spilling into the air. And I'd wonder if effort ever really earns love, or if some debts can never be collected. I'd push the thought away before it rooted. In the apartment, I started leaving the window open. The sound of traffic replaced the old silence. It wasn't comfort, but it was honest. Every breeze that crossed the sill felt like a reminder. Air belongs to no one. You either breathe it or you don't. I told myself I'd stopped caring about Ashley, about Evan, about the version of me who believed building could replace belonging. But sometimes, when the phone buzzed in the middle of the night and the number was unknown, my chest tightened before I could stop it. I never answered. The next morning, I'd delete the missed call and write the same line in my notebook. Do not rebuild. Still, a part of me waited for something I couldn't name. Maybe proof that leaving had meaning. Maybe silence answering silence. It never came. On weekends, I fixed other people's houses for cash. I'd step into living rooms filled with family noise. Kids shouting, dogs running, dishes clattering. And for a few hours, I'd pretend the sound didn't sting. I repaired their outlets, their faucets, their fences, then went home to my quiet apartment and washed the dust off my hands until the water ran clear. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering how long it would take before they stopped saying my name. Whether one day Evan would tell someone my stepfather used to live here, and the word used would finally set me free. I never found out. All I know is that the air around me grew easier to breathe, even if it never felt warm again. Maybe that's what starting over really means. Not new love, not forgiveness, just the ability to inhale without remembering who once stole the air. And yet, late at night, when the city lights fade and everything hums in that low electric quiet, I still catch myself whispering into the dark. Was I wrong? The question hangs there, weightless, unanswered, as steady as breath. The letter arrived in late July, folded twice, edges soft from being handled too long. No return address again, but the handwriting was neater this time, careful, deliberate, as though every word had been measured before being written. The envelope smelled faintly of dust and laundry detergent. It had traveled through hands that still believed in second chances. I set it on the table and let it sit there for a day. Maybe two. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what apology looked like when it came too late. When I finally opened it, I found only a single paragraph, short and halting. Tom, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't understand what you gave until you left. Mom says I shouldn't write, but I wanted to. The house feels empty now. It's different. I hope you're okay. No signature again, though I didn't need one. The words carried his voice. Not the angry boy who said I suffocated the house, but someone older, smaller, learning how absence shapes air. I folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope, then slid it into the drawer with the first one. The paper brushed against its twin like two ghosts recognizing each other. I didn't write back. Not out of anger, not out of pride. Just peace. Silence is its own kind of reply. After that, I stopped driving past the old neighborhood. Whatever happened in that house, whoever bought it, painted over the marks I left on the walls, wasn't mine to carry anymore. The porch light that used to burn all night would now shine for someone else. Still, sometimes, late at night, I'd feel it, a phantom warmth behind my ribs, like the shape of a family that once almost was. I'd sit by the window with the lamp off, watching the city lights shimmer through the heat haze, and think about how much sound one man can endure before he starts to crave nothing but quiet. The strange, the things you notice when you live alone. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the way your own breathing fills the space that used to belong to others. For a while I thought the quiet might break me. Now I think it's the only thing holding me together. I learned to measure time differently, not by birthdays or holidays, but by repairs. The day I fixed the leaking faucet became the day I didn't think of them. The week I repainted the window frames became the week I stopped checking my phone. Progress marked not in joy, but in forgetting. People at work started calling me dependable. Tom always shows up, they said. They meant it as praise. I took it like a diagnosis. Showing up is easy when you have nowhere else to be. Months passed. Summer bled into autumn, and Phoenix cooled just enough to remember it had seasons. The city changed colors, sand shifting to rust, air thinning until it stung your lungs. I'd walk to the edge of downtown some evenings, where the streets gave way to empty lots and the desert began again. Out there, you could hear everything. The hum of power lines, the cry of a bird too far to see, your own heartbeat whispering that you survived. Sometimes I wondered what survival even meant. I had food, rent, silence. But there are kinds of hunger no meal fixes, the ache of wanting someone to see you, even just to say, I remember. Then, one morning, I woke before dawn to a knock at the door. Not frantic, not polite, just steady. I froze. No one ever knocked. The air felt heavy, almost sacred. I opened the door slowly. It wasn't them. Just a delivery driver with the wrong address. He apologized, embarrassed, handed me a package meant for someone else. I signed anyway, needing the motion. When he left, I stood there a long time, staring at the empty hallway, the echo still alive in my ears. For a moment, I let myself believe it had been Evan, just to know how the idea felt. Then I closed the door. Days later, I reread his letter. This time I noticed what it didn't say. No mention of missing me. No questions. Just the admission that something had changed. Maybe that was enough. Maybe understanding comes in pieces, scattered across years, each one small enough to carry. I imagined him older, standing in that house now sold to strangers, telling someone my stepfather used to live here. Maybe he'd pause before saying used to. Maybe not. Either way, the story would move on without me. I think about Ashley sometimes, how she turned up the television instead of defending me, how silence became her shelter. Maybe she thought she was protecting peace. Maybe she just didn't know which side of the quiet to stand on. I don't blame her anymore. Love built on fear of conflict isn't love at all. It's just endurance. One night, I dreamed of her voice. Not words, just sound. When I woke, the apartment was dark, and for a second I couldn't tell whether the quiet was real or just another kind of noise. That's when I understood. Leaving isn't cruelty. It's clarity. Some people need to feel the cold before they believe the warmth was real. I've thought about writing back. A single line, maybe you were wrong about the air. But what good would that do? He already knows. The house itself must have taught him. Walls remember the absence of voices. Instead, I write other things. Not letters, notes to myself, left in the margins of receipts or on the backs of envelopes. Breathe slower. Fix the loose hinge. Don't look back. Small instructions for staying human. The world goes on around me. I see families at the grocery store, fathers loading carts, teenagers rolling their eyes, mothers holding lists longer than patience. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of myself in the freezer door reflection. Older, quieter, invisible in the best way. I go home, cook something simple, eat standing by the counter. The hum of the fridge sounds almost like company. I don't need more. Some evenings, when the sun slides behind the buildings and the sky turns the color of rust, I open the drawer where the 2 letters sleep. I unfold the newer one. Read the last line again. I hope you're okay. I whisper back, though there's no one to hear it. I am. Then I fold it gently and return it to the dark. Maybe that's what forgiveness looks like when there's no one left to receive it. A man talking to paper, to air, to the echoes of his own restraint. The quiet doesn't feel heavy anymore. It just exists, steady and loyal, the way breath fills a room no one else wants. I've stopped asking whether I was wrong. The question has lost its weight. Some choices don't seek approval. They only demand endurance. Still, on the rare nights when the wind slips through the window and carries the faint scent of desert rain, I catch myself wondering, if Evan ever has a son, will he understand me then? Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'll let the silence answer.